Is the Arabic language uniform throughout the Arab world?
No, the Arabic language is not uniform throughout the Arabic world. The Arab world is the way Arabic is spoken in the Arab world is dialectical. In other words, people in Morocco speak an Arabic dialect that is different from people in Algeria, that's different from people in Egypt. And even within a certain country, the villages and tribes may have different versions of pronunciation and even sentence structure and things like that. So it's very possible that an Arab from one part of the world goes to talk to an Arab from another part of the world, and they're not able to talk to each other. They're not able to understand each other. It's very, very possible. Though there is one element of Arabic that's not called dialectical Arabic, which the Arabic term is Ammiya, it's called standard Arabic, or the Arabic term is Fusha. That is the standard version of Arabic. That's the Arabic of something like the Al Jazeera network or the newspaper and things like that. That is the uniform Arabic of the Arab world. But even that Arabic is not the same as the Arabic of the Qur'an. This is the important thing to note. So in other words, even proper, grammatically precise Arabic, formal Arabic of today shouldn't be assumed to be the same as the formal Arabic of 1500 years ago. Of course, the passage of time and societal changes, all of these things impact language. And certainly the Arab world has gone through several changes. So because of that, we have to make a distinction between the ancient Arabic of the Qur'an and then also the standard Arabic or the contemporary Arabic that is spoken today.
So what has made it possible to preserve classical Arabic for so long?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's, as we said, language changes, society changes, and it influences how a word is understood, a phrase is understood. I mean, a simple example, the way you say, that's cool, or what's up nowadays is not the same as you would understand it 100 years ago. The English language transformed dramatically, even in the last 10 years, 15 years. You couldn't say to somebody in the 80s, I Googled you, or what are you doing on your phone? I'm tweeting. You couldn't use these words because even technology impacts language. So the question is, if the Arabic language transformed so much, then it would also necessitate that the understanding of the Qur'an would transform, because the Qur'an is in Arabic, and if the language is changing, then so is our understanding of the text itself. So a preservation movement was actually launched early on in Islam, even in the first generation after Revelation, or during the first generation of Revelation itself, because they saw very, very quickly that the vast majority of people accepting Islam were not Muslims. So now there was already external foreign influence, and foreign influence is one of the things that changes language. So there was a movement not only to maintain the preservation of the Qur'an and Hadith literature, but also to preserve the nuanced Arabic of original times before this foreign influence kind of bombarded the Arab world. The way this was done was scholars actually left major cities, several of them, and went out in the desert just to see how the desert Arabs, the unadulterated Arabic of that region, how do they use that certain figure of speech or that expression that occurs in the Qur'an. And this became this documentation movement of lexicons of the Arabic language that now is called ilm al-bayan. This is the knowledge of eloquence and articulate speech in Arabic. That's been the case for, that was the case for the first few centuries, and becomes the basis of actually thorough Islamic studies. In other words, nobody can say that they're studying the Qur'an unless they're getting into a deep study of classical Arabic and ancient meaning and figures of speech and grammatical structures, all of which was documented early on. Even the poetry of Arabs, pagan Arabs before Islam, that's actually even sometimes immoral or unethical and vulgar even that was preserved, because that was considered part of preserving the language. And the more you preserve the language, the better insight you have into the language of the Qur'an, because it came at a specific time. So you need to understand how that language was understood at that specific time. So yeah, that is certainly how the language was preserved for all this time.